When you look back in hindsight, everything is 2020. In hindsight, you make mistakes, but learning from it. In hindsight, shaping yesterday and your tomorrow. In hindsight, it's so much clearer now. This is Hindsight, the podcast, and introducing your host, Lee Jones.
What's that?
I always like meeting the dog when I'm on a podcast.
Oh, you'll probably meet Jasper.
I think that's great. It's like the one downside to no video is I can't see the dog.
Oh, I got you. So you saw, and we're recording now, just so you know. But you saw how difficult it was for me to get this and get connected to you right now. Could you imagine if I was doing video as well?
Oh, so. I'm not complaining. Other than I think you probably have a cute dog, but you can always take a picture of your dog and send it to me later.
Oh, I will send you a picture of Jasper in an email. He's a Shih Tzu, but we cut his hair down, so he doesn't really look like a Shih Tzu. We cut his hair down depending on the weather here. So when it's hot, he hates the heat, and so we cut him all the way down, so he really doesn't look like a Shih Tzu.
I know he's right on that.
Yeah,
I don't like the heat either.
So how's everything going, Dinah? Thank you once again for taking the time out and coming and bless me in our podcast.
I've been excited about this for a while.
Yeah, thank you for staying engaged with me. There's been a few, for anybody who's listening, there's been a few pushbacks on the recording of this, but here we are, and I'm so happy to have you on here.
Thank you.
So, just to jump in, and I typically have a slight, tiny introduction at the beginning of the podcast. But you worked in was it corporate? Yeah. What was the title?
I was in corporate IT for 20-something years.
Okay.
So I went to college for my bachelor's degree is in chemistry, which I've never directly worked in chemistry. I figured out I didn't want to do that my junior year.
Okay.
And then it was faster to finish my degree and then get my master's degree in engineering management, where I focused on basically management of technology and also quality management, learning what quality actually is. And then I jumped into IT consulting after I got my master's degree, and focused a lot on my whole career has been focused on kind of being that bridge on technology teams or in tech companies between business side and technologists. So I like to say I'm a little bit of a secret decoder ring. So whenever there's kind of that line or that tension between the highly analytical engineering people that have to figure out how to do something, and then business side people that are trying to press on what to do, I was often the kind of the mediator and the translator for those concerns, which is kind of a cool place to be.
Right.
I really enjoyed it. I did a lot of different roles that leaned on those skills. And I feel like to a certain degree, I do that now because I focus on career and executive coaching. Most of my clients are leaders in the types of companies and roles that I came from. So a lot of engineers, software technologists, project managers, those kinds of people are most of who I work with. So, yeah, I feel like I've been a communicator for my whole career, but I didn't realize until maybe 2 years ago that that's primarily been my job my whole career.
So. Awesome. So when did you find out? When did that job begin to suck for you?
When did it begin to suck?
Yeah.
What's interesting is I love that question because, like, I know the platform we found each other on, like my top line of my bio says work shouldn't suck, which I firmly believe in. There were actually a few iterations of it suckingly. So I did not do all that 20 years at the same company. I moved around quite a bit in my career. I started my career during the internet boom. So in 1999, I took my first job out of college and I was happily working as an IT consultant, learning all the things and getting exposure to multiple industries. And then I got laid off like a lot of people did at the end of 2000, found another job really quickly, got laid off again. And so that cycle sucked because I'd grown up in a household with parents that worked for the same company for decades. And they're like, what did we do wrong? Like, we have this kid that can't hold a job. That's
Oh
how they
boy.
felt like during that.
Wow.
But the after I kind of got settled, so in 2002, I found a job with a healthcare IT company. I stayed at that place for 5 years and had several roles within that company. But what happened is like each of the jobs sort of outlived their usefulness in some way. So in my career and executive coaching practice, I talk about 4 foundations of an ideal job or a dream job. You know, everybody has a different word that they like to use for that, but they're basically having the right work to do. So work that's interesting and exciting and challenging enough without being too far over your head. Working for the right leaders, meaning both you have a great direct boss and also you work at a company with a good strategic direction. There's the right environment, which covers everything from like, are you being paid fairly for the market to do you have flexibility that you need in your job to is it highly bureaucratic or is it a little looser, those kinds of things. And then finally, the right culture, which is purely about values and action, the way I define culture. And at various stages in my career, I would find that a couple of those pillars or those foundations might be broken. So when I worked for that job, the healthcare IT company, I was there for, like I said, almost 5 years. And towards the end of it, what was going on is there was not really room for advancement the way that I wanted to advance anymore. And I also was working for a leader that was really problematic. Like, I actually knew her before I went to work with her in my last role, but she and I had always gotten along well. But it turned out she was the type of manager that always had to have somebody on their team they're kind of after. You know, like there's always that one
Right.
direct report that she has to have one direct report that she's riding really hard.
Okay.
And she basically made my life hell. And so I was like, well, the work is starting to be boring and this boss is no good. So it's time to move on. And I had a couple different things like that where I would see that usually it takes 2 or 3 of those pillars before I would want to make a jump, you know, to be broken before I'd want to make a jump. But the very last thing before I left and went full time into my own business, which I'd been coaching on the side for a few years, doing some consulting on the side for a few years, was a combination of environment and leadership. So there was promises of promotion. I had actually been functioning in a role for 2 years. I'd been in a role and I was functioning at least one, if not 2 roles higher, and not getting promoted. And there were a couple other people in the department that were dealing with the same thing. They were just not promoting people to the role that they were doing. And we were grossly underpaid. And I got real sick of that. And then also, I worked for an executive that he basically was not taking care of issues that I reported with regard to discrimination on the basis of visa status. So he violated company anti-discrimination policy, and I
Right.
I could not be there for any longer whenever that
Okay.
happened. So
That was your last
that
position?
was my last position. I worked
Got
for
it.
someone that basically was horrible in all the ways a leader can be horrible, up to and including violating anti-discrimination policy at the company. So
Right. So in your 20 years prior to, um, you named 4 foundations. So did you basically come up with, well, I was lacking in 1 or 2 of these different pillars or foundations, and then once you got away from it, you kind of realized like these were the things that would make for a good environment. How did you come
yeah,
up with
I,
the?
I came up with those foundations about 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
It was really, whenever I started full time in my business, one of the things I learned really quickly is that if you are a coach or a consultant that doesn't have frameworks to help explain what you do to people, you're going to starve
Mm-hmm.
because clients need something to grab onto. And I started looking through the work I'd done with prior clients, and I started thinking through my own career and careers of my friends that had made shifts, where I knew deep reasons around it. And I realized that those were the four buckets or foundations.
Right.
So I wasn't at the age of like 26, I wasn't thinking
Uh-huh.
to myself, well, we're missing this pillar. No, I didn't have any of that at that time. That's been developed in the last few years, but it's real handy.
No, it really is
Handy.
because
Oh,
I was telling you earlier, I did 26 years in the army, and so I was just used to whatever type of environment that was there at the time. Right now, we tried to have, I mean, we had training and leadership training and things like that, right? But rarely did you have all four of these pillars. And so when I got out of the military, because that's really just based on structure, right? It's based
hmm.
on rules and procedures and structure, and everything has to be followed. When I got out, I didn't know
You didn't
how,
know what to do.
you get what I'm saying? I didn't know how the civilian workplace would be, and I was kind of nervous about it. And I've landed in a spot where I can honestly say the culture is great, the environment is wonderful, my leader, the leaders, so my direct leader and above are great. And I have interesting work, though it's challenging as hell, right?
Yeah,
But
you want like one thing that I actually have been contemplating writing a book about this because I've done enough talks and I worked with enough clients on it at this point. One of the things that I find so interesting is how few people that are talking about, say, culture or, the right kind of work to do are looking at it through the lens of helping someone identify what they want or have the courage to say what they want out loud, as opposed to imposing their impressions of a great culture.
okay.
So for me, whenever I'm working with people, I could work with someone out of the military. There are a lot of transition things that I'm not equipped to deal with. I don't know quite enough about that world to specialize in that. But fundamentally, what I'm trying to do is help my clients understand and articulate this is what I'm about. This is what I need. And then go figure out how to ask questions to find it. So you, on some level, had done this, Lee. You knew yourself, or you're just the luckiest human on earth. That's possible too. But you knew enough about yourself to know, ooh, this job I have right now, you might not have been able to say why succinctly, but you knew that it was resonating with you. So for me, I'm a pretty informal person. I hate bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy. But
Right.
what's bureaucracy to me is comforting to somebody else that really enjoys structure. Neither of those things are right or wrong. And a lot of people like to say things about culture as if there's one universal perfect culture or perfect work environment. Something we've seen thrown around a lot online is everybody wants to just work remotely. That's actually not true.
Oh, I know.
There's a lot of people that want to, well, and that's not even counting like, well, some people can't. Like the plumber cannot fix your pipes from his home office. So, um, but there's a lot of people that are finding that they've done a few years now of 100% remote and they're missing human interaction. They're missing a reason to put on pants every day, that kind of stuff. So I try not to presume what culture is right for somebody,
Hmm.
what work is right for somebody. I try to help guide them to what's going to work for them. So,
Right.
and to be open to trial and error. Like a little trial and error is fine. Failing a little bit on getting this right is fine. And you mentioned earlier, like in the military, you never saw where all four things were great at the same time. Something I also talk to some of my clients about is sometimes because we want to eat and live indoors, right? I don't know. Do you like eating and living indoors, Lee? I'm a fan. You got to feed Jasper, your dog.
There you go.
He likes eating and living indoors.
Yeah, he
You,
does.
if you can't quite hit all four of them, you need to know which ones are most important to you. And then also, I encourage people to figure out how to go scratch the itch for the other ones. So, as an example, sometimes people have a hurdle to qualify for more interesting work. Maybe they want to transition into being a project manager or transition into something that they don't have all the skills for yet, but
Mm-hmm.
they need to have a job now. Like they need to have something now because they've got to eat. So I would encourage them, figure out how to go find a company where maybe there's a growth path into what you want to do, but the other pillars are good. Like if the flexibility is good and your leader is good, and the culture is good, then you're going to find it easier to get support for that longer term career transition you want. And then maybe while you're working that job that hopefully fits with your life, you can go take some classes to get qualifications or start a side hustle or something like that, just so that you can keep moving in that direction of having 4 out of 4 correct.
Right. Good.
Oh.
So Jasper gives me a reason every morning at about 5:30 to put on some pants. Right.
Right. What
So
is
I
it?
don't.
Pants or is it sweatpants? Let's
Right.
be
Well, today I had on jeans because I told
okay.
you it was like 39 degrees
Yeah.
outside.
Yeah.
But typically it's sweatpants. So you got me there. And I don't want to work remote, but it's not because of the people. Um, it's the traffic. Right. I absolutely enjoy it. Like I was just in the office yesterday, as a matter of fact, and I absolutely enjoy the people that I work with.
Yeah.
Right. But I don't want to drive in traffic for an hour and a half, 2 hours one way, right, to
Every day.
get that enjoyment.
Yeah.
Right. So I love the time we spend when I'm there at work, and it's not a social event. Obviously we're doing a lot of work. But like I said, the culture and the environment is really optimal
What do you
where I
like
work
about the
at.
culture at your work? I love asking people about this. Tell me
What
what you like about the culture at your work.
Well, what I like about it is you have guidance, right? So we have a common goal, right, in business, right, whatever that the leader puts out, and then there's guidance. But what happens is you have the ability to go about it in your own way, to make
Mm,
mistakes, to find ways
yes.
to get better, right, without being fearful, right, to take
Oh,
chances, you
huge.
know. So it's a really good environment, and then everyone's fair. If you mess up, you got to answer for it, of course, like most places, right? But it's not in a way to kind of demean you. It's more in a way to build you up and to get everything, in a stronger structure, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
I would describe that as a culture of where experimentation is allowed,
Right.
which I think is really important. And the world I came from in IT, most of a big chunk of my career was in teams using agile software development. And in the most effective software development jobs using agile, experimentation is actually baked into all of the processes. So there's no, trying to say that you know everything that you're going to build for the next year up front. And there's no you might have a roadmap of we want to solve these problems with our software that we're selling or that we're using internally in the next year, but you're not trying to get down to the nth degree up front. And that allows for feedback loops and experimentation and trying and falling on your face and picking yourself back up and fixing it. And
Right.
I value that a lot. So sounds like I would like that place too.
I know
At
you
least that
would.
part of that place. But what's so interesting is a lot of people don't understand culture. And when I first came up with those foundations, there were only 3. So I had environment and culture were smashed together under culture. And then I realized that people were confusing things like free pizza on Friday and office
Oh yeah.
snacks and that kind of stuff with culture. And to me, I actually I started following a really great people leader. So she used to be a chief people officer. Her name is Barbie Winterbottom. Strongly suggest following her on LinkedIn. She's great. But she's the first one I heard talking about culture being values and action. And when we all live in a world where people have slick marketing departments and it's not that hard to write up a few paragraphs about values on a website, it can be very difficult for a prospective employee or a prospective investor or client to figure out what actually is happening in the culture of a company.
Mm.
And when you're an employee, going into the office, or being part of a team, whether you're going in the office or not, 40 plus hours a week, that's a lot. That's a lot of your life if it turns out that the values are wrong. And if you're thinking about being a client or a partner in some way of a firm, if you hook up with the wrong company with the wrong culture, it can be a multi-million-dollar mistake. You can harm your business just by being in a partnership with the wrong person that has a values clash. So I like to ask people, don't let the recruiter or the hiring manager or anybody get away with just saying, "Oh, well, this place has a great culture," because that's really lazy. Instead, I like them to ask virtually everybody that they interview with, "What is one of the corporate values that you love the most, and how do you see it play out in day-to-day life working here and in policy?"
Mm. Okay.
Because and some things are a little more intangible, like you might not see them in policy or they might be developing policy. But a really good example that I had someone point out is there, after George Floyd was murdered, there were a lot of people that were trying to say, "Oh, we value diversity, we value equity, blah blah blah, DEI forever."
Right.
But then when you looked and you asked questions, what you found out is that they had not yet updated their anti-discrimination policy to cover LGBTQ community. They had not, and they didn't have things like domestic partner benefits
Mm.
inside their benefits programs, and there was no plan to get there. Now, the decision to make those pivots is huge. So, if you value DEI and belonging, it's not like updating your insurance policies is the only way to show that you care about that.
Right.
But if a large company in particular that can afford more expensive benefits, that can take more risks in those areas or incur more expense, is not doing it, it's more of a red flag. So I
Right.
actually do some small business consulting work with some businesses that are kind of in that like 10 employees sort of range, sometimes a little
Okay.
more, sometimes a little less. And
Right.
I went over that with a business owner last year because we were updating his employee handbook and we were trying to make sure the policies were in line with other things he had in place. And he said, I really struggle with this because right now I have an office. His entire team at the time was women. It was a small operational staff of women. Um, Nobody was transgender, for example, but he was very concerned about the implications of officially updating all of his employee handbook to call out that we do not discriminate on the basis of transgender status, because his attorney advised them that he was going to have to go redo all of his health insurance in order to
Wow.
do that. So it's like those are big decisions to make, but um, you can't just throw it on the wall. And the point of all of it is you cannot just throw it on the wall and say, we are now an amazing, diverse, equity, inclusion, belonging type company when you have done absolutely nothing else. So, and that goes
Man.
for the other value. So,
So speaking of DE and like you're
which
really
I'm not an expert on that, by
no,
the
you don't have to
way.
be. I'm just gonna.
Like, I want everyone to know that the white lady from Kansas is not pretending to be a DEI expert, although I do have thoughts on it. So please shoot, let's talk about it. Go.
No, so I'm a member of the board for the African American Employee Resource Group,
Okay.
and so our parent company um, invited all of the board members for all of the ERG groups up to South Carolina to have like a summit.
Cool.
And in doing so, the president of our parent company, he stayed the entire day, right? He was a part of the conversation, a part of the exercises and things like that. And then the group talk or not the, I shouldn't say group talk, but the conversations and discussions um, were really genuine, and there are a lot of passionate people um, in our totality of the ERG program. And I had a guy, one of my coworkers, he came to me and he was like, "Hey, with so many ERGs standing up, so I think we have like Watt, the LBG acronym of the LB. I get that wrong all the time, so I apologize.
LGBTQ.
Right. So Watt, African American, Latinos, the millennials or the different generations, right?
Mhm.
They're called Connect. And we're standing up the military veterans one, and I'll be the president of that board in the next month or so. And the question was, with so many different groups, employee resource groups, standing up, then are you concerned with the perception of those starting segregated groups? And I was like, huh, that's an interesting perspective, because that's not the perspective or the thought that I initially had, right? And then when I went to the summit, I definitely didn't have, because it was all about combined efforts, right? So
Mhm.
the African American and Latinos and the Watt having an event together, right? It's all about a combined message to say, hey, we're here, and if there are any issues, let's talk about it, right? This is an open space. This is a not a safe space, but it's a forum, right, for us to talk about different things. I'm getting all messed up in the mouth because it's
You're
emotionally,
fine.
what I'm saying, it really brings emotion to me, just thinking about the passion that the people showed at the event. But this is one of the reasons, and I'm gonna sum this up really quick. This is one of the reasons why, and I wanted to be a part of those ERGs as well, that I feel really good about the environment and the culture, because from the top up, like from the leadership level,
Mhm.
you can see that it is something that they're passionate about. It's not something that was just pinned. It's not
Yeah.
something, and you can see the actions of things. You talked about the different policies, right, for transgender, or the different same sex uh, uh, benefits, right? And those things have been addressed, and those things have been updated, right? So, anyway, go ahead. I just wanted to say that because I was super
No, I love that
impressed.
you shared that because I have I've worked at some companies that early in my career worked at some bigger companies that were large
Hmm.
enough to have ERGs, but they weren't cool yet. Like
Right.
they weren't as big as they are right now. And then I went through a period where it wasn't a thing because that was just like not the size of company that I was working in. But I've had a complex relationship with how I thought about ERGs too, because I've been a woman in tech and I found that I cannot stand a lot of the women in tech or women focused organizations because they end up being man haters clubs. And so for
Mm.
me, the difference, like whether it is a school club, a meetup in the community, a whole entire separate organization, or an ERG, for me to want to participate and support something, I want to know that you're for something instead of spending all your energy being against something. I think fundamentally, like we're all, I'm not a fan of injustice in general. So of course I'm going to combat that kind of thing. But walking into a woman's focused group where they are spending all their time saying basically the patriarchy sucks is very different from walking into a woman's focused group where they're saying, how can we lift each other up? So I prefer the latter.
Mm.
So with the ERGs, I think sometimes what happens is that people feel like, and this is common with white men, because when all these ERGs start up, what ends up happening is that white men feel like they don't have a place to belong at their workplace, especially if the ERG program is really strong. I've heard people say this. And so then it's like, well, HR sure doesn't want to set up a white guy's ERG. But at the same time, how do we make sure 100% of the people working at this company can feel like they have a place to go to belong? I don't have an answer to that. I'm not smart enough
Interesting. I like
for
that
that.
though.
But I've been really interested in that for a while. This last year, I started there's the first few years in my coaching career, I attracted more women. And I think part of it is because I was not embracing my own personality as much as I could. And part of it is because a lot of times women feel more comfortable being coached by a woman. But in 2022 it's the first year that I had kind of a 50-50 split. I may even have actually had more private clients that were men this year. And
Okay.
so I really got to hear some things over and over again that I had not heard. And a lot of that is around the fact that men, and most of my client, all but one of my clients this year was a white man. No, two. I had one man from Puerto Rico and one Indian man. And then all my other male clients were men. And it was very interesting to talk to them about two different areas. Number one is mental health, because there are a lot of men that do not feel safe to talk about the fact that they are burned out and they are stressed and they wish they could spend more time with their families, just like women feel more comfortable and open to do, at least in online spaces. And one of the big reasons why it's not safe for men is that the women attack them. A lot of women have felt like they were bearing the load for so long that if a man says, well, yeah, I'm definitely stressed out too, or I have same concerns, some of the women will go back and say, well, shoes on the other foot, haha, type stuff. And I've watched this happen in comment sections to my clients.
Right.
So I'm not making this stuff up. The other area, another big area is in relationship to DEI, because there's a very loud set of people, and I don't know that it's the majority or the more minority, but I just know that I've heard it loudly, that think that no white person is ever qualified to work in the DEI space. And that definitely no like executive leader in DEI should be white. Some of them specifically say only Black people are qualified for that. And I think that there's problems with that. I understand some of the sentiments, but it's also really, really problematic when you're a white man that wants to do better for women, for people of other races, for, all kinds of different groups, and you don't know how. And then you get told you're kind of like almost not welcome into the conversation, which is really not a fun place to be in. So I've seen both of those things play out, and both of those
Yeah.
things causing stress in people in my community. And so, I don't know the solution to it. My solution tends to be, can we talk to each other about what's really the problem?
Right.
And can we be open? But it's very hard for people to be open sometimes. So,
Right. It is hard. It is hard to get people to open up.
yeah.
And that was part of my concern as well. Like, not
I love
necessarily.
that you have a healthy ERG
Yeah, we
community
do.
that
We
you're
do.
talking
We
about,
really
and
do.
I really love that there was that summit to coordinate efforts. I think that's critical.
Right. But still, that's all the passionate people
Yeah.
who are on the boards, right? And there's still the concern with perception, right? So, um, you know, especially when it disseminates down to the different operating companies and things
Mhm.
like that across the country, right? Who are in different areas, right? I'm in California, so it's a lot more liberal. You start going down south, you start going up north, different places, right? They have different sentiments, different perceptions, different ideals, and all that other stuff. So that is interesting, and that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah,
So I
one of the
definitely.
things I see happen a lot,
Hmm.
is that people try to politicize things that shouldn't be I mean, we try to politicize everything, it feels like,
Well, these
like
days, yeah.
how you feel about Twitter right now is like a political thing,
Yeah,
which is crazy because that's just watching a train wreck, no matter
yeah,
what party you're in or how you feel about Twitter. Twitter's been a train wreck since it opened, as far
right,
as I'm concerned. Nothing going on with Elon Musk really is it, it's just in the news. It's always been a mess.
right,
But I think that one of the reasons rank and file people sometimes get upset about things like ERGs or changes in policy is because the things end up getting politicized in the conversation too quickly, unintentionally or unintentionally. One of my biggest concerns, do you guys have an ERG at your company for any ERGs for either neurodiverse people or people that are just with disabilities? Is that on your list?
I don't think we do, but I believe at the summit, because we're like a lot of these groups, and that's why I said they're coming up, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, so we want to make sure that everyone's included, right, and make sure that it's you get what I'm saying.
yeah.
So to answer your question, no, but I'm pretty sure that it's in the works.
Good, because what I see right now, I have a couple of friends I've met in the last year or two, well, since COVID,
Hmm.
that say that honestly, one of the best gifts they've been given in their career is COVID because they are disabled and it is hard for them to hold down a job where they work 5 days a week in
Mm.
an office.
Yeah.
And one of them said, she actually is an extrovert that is like wanting to go to the office. Like she wishes she could go more, but she has to find a balance. And, she's
Right.
constantly, she can't always drive. Like some of her conditions make it difficult for her to drive. And she's not in an area with good public transport. And so, like, for her to feel belonging and to get mental health needs met actually involves going to the office sometimes, and her company is not doing a stellar job of supporting that right now.
Got it. Right.
So the whole issue of disability, whether it is physical or mental, like neuro, I don't know, the like neurodiversity type thing,
Hmm.
all of that stuff I think is going to be the next frontier
Right.
because this giant proportion of people have invisible disabilities
Right.
that they don't want to have to talk about. Like they don't want everything to be about their disability. I found out in 2021 that I have Hashimoto's and a couple of other endocrine disorders that'll lay me out flat. And for me, I work for myself and yes, I need to make enough money to live and everything, but if I need to sleep in, it's not a big deal. And not everybody has that luxury.
Right.
So I
That's
did
true.
not know where this conversation was going to go, but I'm
Yeah,
having
this way I know, but then
went
that's what
in a
makes it.
different direction.
I
Um,
didn't send you any questions that I was going to,
no,
I
I
just want to have a conversation with you, right?
yeah,
So this
I
is
dig
awesome.
it because so often, like sometimes, especially with the podcasts that are only wanting a strict like 20 or 30-minute format, it's like you feel like you're hearing the same thing over and over again. And I'm like, if I write a book about these 4 foundations or about something else, I'm happy to go on 150 podcasts and talk about the book and talk about the 4 things in the book and answer all the book questions. But it's so cool to just talk to a person that I've never met before about stuff. I love
Isn't it?
it. Yeah, I
I do
did.
too, but I am going to bring it back,
Yeah,
right?
let's do it.
Because well,
Your show, buddy.
we didn't really go anywhere, but I'm going to bring it back to a point where your clients are a lot of leaders, right? So you
Yeah.
deal with executives and stuff like that,
Yeah,
right?
I deal mostly with for my corporate career in executive coaching clients, it's mostly people from like frontline management up to like VP level. I don't
Okay.
hang out in the C-suite that much at this point. I
Right.
do work with some small business owners, so I've done like some advisory consulting and executive coaching for a handful of small business. So I'm dealing with the CEO in that
Got you.
case, but it's over 20 people or 10 people or, it's not a Fortune 500 company.
So, do you give them? So, I know we were talking about based off of the platform that we met on, work shouldn't suck, and these are your 4 foundations, right? But when you're talking to executives or leaders, do you have a an opportunity to discuss their contribution to making the environment better,
Oh yeah.
or what are their
Oh yeah.
responsibilities to make that
So
happen?
I talk about that a lot, and I read a book recently. You might enjoy this book. It's called 9 Lies About Work.
Okay.
And so it talks about like these things that I don't want to spoil the book for you, but one of the things that is a lie about work that they refute is that it matters what company you work for. And long story short, the research that they did is that it's actually there's more variance in culture and employee engagement and happiness between teams in the same company than there is between the companies at large. So there's more difference between like engineering team number 1 at Cisco and engineering team number 2 that may be in a different office at Cisco than there is between like Cisco and Oracle, as
Okay.
both being giant tech companies. And so I like talking about that because since right now I'm not focusing on large company C-suite, when you hear all this culture has to come from top down type stuff, people that are at middle management levels feel disempowered. You know, they're like, I'm not in the boardroom with the CEO. What can I do? And so if they can focus on making their team a great place to work, they can still be like accepting as much responsibility as they can. They might not be able to, you know, shape the entirety of the corporate culture, but they can definitely make their team a much better place to work. And I do some reframing with people. I have a client right now who is currently being tapped as the successor to be promoted to be GM of a business unit within his company. And I've been working with him most of this year. And I talked to him a lot about people leadership. And one of the questions I posed to him recently was, what do you consider your prime directive as the GM to be? And he said, well, it's, you know, he said some things about maintaining customer satisfaction and profitability and that kind of stuff. And a lot of that is stuff that he's responsible for in his current role as a manager. And I said, what if that's not actually your job? What if your job is instead to create the environment where everybody inside your business unit can make sure those things happen? It's a total reframe.
Right.
And so the conversations that we're having about how he would lead and what he's responsible for and where he would spend his time, it's different. Because if you are managing profitability, your nose might be in your Tableau reporting portal, checking out what's going on with stuff and figuring out who approved this deal that, you know, is not hitting a profitability target. Where if your role is to create an environment, it might be more about communications training, or it might be more just spending a lot of time talking to people about what they need in order to make things happen. So I do talk to people about that. It's one of my favorite parts of my job, honestly.
Good.
It's like I accidentally figured out I was good at that. So I was like, oh,
well, and I'm glad.
How do I make that more of my job? So,
and I'm glad that you do, because that is an important message, especially, you know, if I mean, that's a key point that you brought up. If you're not in the room that makes those decisions, right? How can you affect change, right? You feel disempowered, or not empowered, I should say. So good. I like that. And
how do you like it? Well, it's so many people feel powerless, and what's so interesting to me is, you know, the people that I work with, I think the lowest salary of somebody that I worked with this year was maybe like $70K. You know, like most of the people I'm working with are $100K plus.
Right.
And it's starting to tilt higher and higher as I work with more and more leaders in this tech space. So people that are working in salaries that it's kind of like a survival thing, I don't have as much experience working with clients like that, because I don't know that I have credibility to relate to that situation. I haven't really been in it. I can relate to the situations of the people that I've been in. But what I will say is that I don't care whether I'm working with a client that makes $70K or I'm working with a client that makes $500K. I hear about feelings of powerlessness from every single level.
Right.
So the CEO of a company might feel powerless because they have trouble influencing a board. And some might say, well, your job is to get the board on board. Oh, see what I did there? Yeah. Your job is to get the board on board, but that doesn't mean that they don't feel like it's really hard. So everybody has like a lot of hard at every level. And so I talk to people a lot about their hard and what's manageable and what is just not worth it. Because sometimes sometimes hard is something worth busting through. And sometimes hard is just the universe telling you that this situation is no longer serving you or no longer right for you.
Right. That's true. So, our final, we're going to close this out. But before we go, I just would like for you to give some advice
All right.
to the audience. Something very
Here's
profound. There you go.
here's this is simple, but I've been told it's profound. So you tell me what you think.
Okay.
The biggest thing I have been telling people when they ask me what's one thing that you wish my podcast audience knew, or what's one thing you want me to know as, as your client, Diana, and that is what you want actually matters. We spend so much of our lives trying to do what everybody else wants. And if you ever read, there's a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. I can't remember who wrote it, but one of the top 5 regrets of the dying is that they did not live a life more authentic to who they were and who they wanted to be.
Right.
So what you want matters. And that doesn't mean that you're like a selfish jerk all the time. But it means that if you want to work at a company that prioritizes having a healthy culture and doing things like having ERG groups like you work for, you might want to be calling Lee and saying, tell me about your company because this sounds like a place I want to work, instead of sitting and stewing at a small company that doesn't invest anything in that. If
Right.
you want to do work that's challenging, then you need to figure out how to go and do it instead of sitting in the corner saying, if work was fun, they wouldn't call it work, which is kind of an attitude I heard a lot when I was growing up. So what you want actually matters. It is okay to want things, and it is okay to go and chase those things. It's not selfish, or if it is selfish, it's selfish in that putting on your oxygen mask first kind of way.
Right. To help
That's
others.
my takeaway.
Diana Alt. Am I saying that?
Yeah, you got it.
Alt.
Alt.
Your alter ego, Diana, aka the secret decoder ring.
Oh, I like that.
I like it too.
I've got no BS career growth strategist and executive coach everywhere, but maybe I'll change it to secret decoder ring.
Let's put no BS. I like that. I like that too.
I like the no BS. I picked that and put that kind of in some of my branding because other people told me that's who I was. I'm like, well, that's what I'm projecting. Let's own it.
I like it. Hey, and I also like the fact, I appreciate you coming in, just having a good conversation with me. That's what it's all about. And then taking a look back, looking at some things and how you've created your future, your present space, right? By looking at some things that happened in the past. The podcast is called Hindsight, right? So we take a look at that and what can we do to make it a more meaningful life without having those top regrets that you spoke about, those top 10 regrets of the dying, right? Because I hear a lot about that as well, where you're doing stuff and you got to make money, you got to live, right? So you accept a lot of things.
Yeah.
And you sacrifice other things, right, that are important to you in that space. So understanding what is important to you and then looking out, because there's so many places that you can have it your way, right?
There's
and
never
then
been more opportunity
to
go chase what you want
than
there is right now. That doesn't mean that it's easy.
Oh, it's not easy.
So many of the things that we can do now didn't exist 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
Or 10 or 15.
Yeah.
When I first joined the Army, and I'm not going to make this a long story, but when I first joined the Army, it was because I wanted to be a park ranger.
Oh, yeah?
Right.
Cool.
And stupid me, right? They said, oh, well, you can do 2 years in the Army or you can do 2 years in college. And I chose the Army because I'm that guy. Right. So I was done with high school. High school was not hard. It was fun.
You were just done.
But I just mentally, and I look back on this now, I just was not in the mind state of the curriculum of high school. Like I wanted to know what I wanted to know. I already knew how to read, so why am I doing English lit and why am I doing all of these things? I know how to read, right? So I focused on drafting. I focused on more artistic type stuff. And when I got out of the Army, I went and I worked for a engineering company in Maryland, right?
Mm-hmm.
But But I really, once I did that and I was like, you know what, I want to be a federal person. I think that's what it was. I wanted to, be federal. So park ranger was pretty cool because I didn't want to be a full cop, but I wanted to be a cop. And then that was the requirement. So anyway, a whole lot of dumb stuff, right? But I look back on those things and I try to tell people, like, just like that is a small part of your life. Like, I'm 52 now, right? That was so long ago,
I know.
right? But it still impacts like a lot of things. Like all of those decisions that you make throughout your life, they impact you. They make you who you are. They either give you those opportunities or they limit some opportunities, right? Based off of the decisions you make. So the whole point of, and I told you another thing earlier, but really personally for me, the whole point of hindsight for me is to understand that you have to make the best decisions, right? The better your decisions that you make, because we're making them all the time. I had a decision to talk to you today. You had a decision to wait while I tried to figure out all of the ins and outs and get the connection together, right?
Yeah.
But all of those decisions, small or big, do I leave this job and go for another position that I have no idea how the culture is, the climate, the people, the boss, right? But all of those decisions make you who you are at this moment in your right now.
Yeah, that's why I don't talk about, like, there's not a lot of regrets that I carry.
Yeah,
You
me
know,
either, really.
there's a few, and most of them are around things not done, not things that I did, which is a really common thing.
Yeah,
But at the same time, I would temper your message of make good decisions with, don't be so afraid that your decision has to be perfect that you don't do anything. So
I like that too.
improving the quality of your decisions as you go through life is a good thing. It's why we do stupid stuff when we're in high school and college, and then we start to get
Improving
smarter and we do less stupid stuff. But
improving the quality of your decision making. Let me put that down.
yeah,
Oh,
that's a real thing that people need to focus on. And, like, honestly, in 30s and 40s, the poor quality decision that I hear people make a lot
mm-hmm.
is one to chase money
Yeah,
in a way that is detrimental to health or relationships.
yeah,
And the sweet spot where a lot of my clients are at, I work with a lot of people who hit this, they're 42 years old, or most of my clients are between like 35 and early 50s.
right.
And they just have hit this moment of like, is this all? Is
Yeah,
this all there is? And so some of my clients, yeah, they want to go make more money because they're underpaid, but a lot of my clients are really trying to chase fulfillment. They're not
yeah,
trying to chase money, and they're trying to take a shift that'll allow them to recapture health that they
right.
sacrificed or things like that. So improving quality of decision.
I got it. I
However,
wrote it down, and that'll be my new the way I can capture what I'm trying to
well,
say. So
I'll
I
send you my
appreciate that.
copywriting fee invoice.
I know. Look, I'm getting coached by the coach to beat no BS.
Hey, there is no BS here. No BS.
All right.
So,
All right, Don. Where can someone reach out to you? And obviously, I'll put some stuff in
yeah,
the
probably
show
the best
notes.
places to find me and kind of figure out about me. I have my website is dianaalt.com.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to just kind of follow what I'm doing or hop on my email list, I have an email list that is very entertaining. If I do say so myself. You
Awesome.
can smash the big green button at the top and it'll
Oh,
take you to a form to fill out. I also am very active on LinkedIn and Facebook. So my LinkedIn profile is probably the best place to go to see some of how I think about things and to connect with me there. So
beautiful.
that's the best spots.
All right, I got it. Hey, once again, thank you, Diana, for coming on the show. Your insight is amazing.
Hindsight is 2020. Hindsight is key. To learn that you don't need no type of degree. Learn from the past, see what the present gon' be. I'm a wise man, look at these blessings on me. Hindsight is 2020. Hindsight is key. To learn that you don't need no type of degree. Learn from the past, see what the present gon' be. I'm a wise man, look at these blessings on me.